enter its sacred precincts, but content to worship the priestess from afar. With such unconscious intervals the monotonous procession of blue skies, glittering sunshine, brief twilights, and starlit nights passed over Red Gulch. Miss Mary grew fond of walking in the sedate and proper woods. Perhaps she believed, with Mrs. Steiger, that the balsamic odours of the firs did her chest good, for certainly her slight cough was less frequent and her step was firmer. Perhaps she had learned the unending lesson which the patient pines never weary of repeating to heedful or listless ears. And so, one day, she planned a picnic on Buckeye Hill, and took the children with her. Away from the dusty road, the straggling shanties, the yellow ditches, the clamour of restless engines, the cheap finery of shop windows, the deeper glitter of paint and coloured glass, and the thin veneering which barbarism takes upon itself in such localities, what infinite relief was theirs! The last heap of ragged rock and clay passed, the last unsightly chasm crossed, how the waiting woods opened their long files to receive them! How the children, perhaps because they had not yet grown quite away from the breast of the bounteous mother, threw themselves face downward on her brown bosom with uncouth caresses, filling the air with their laughter; and how Miss Mary herself, felinely fastidious and entrenched as she was in the purity of spotless skirts, collar, and cuffs, forgot all, and ran like a crested quail at the head of her brood until, romping, laughing, and panting, with a loosened braid of brown hair, a hat hanging by a knotted ribbon from her throat, she came suddenly and violently, in the heart of the forest, upon the luckless Sandy. The explanations, apologies, and not overwise conversation that ensued need not be indicated here. It would seem, however, that Miss Mary had already established some acquaintance with this ex-drunkard. Enough that he was soon accepted as one of the party, that the children, with that quick intelligence which Providence gives the helpless, recognized a friend, and played with his blond beard and long silken moustache, and took other liberties, as the helpless are apt to do. And when he had built a fire against a tree, and had shown them other mysteries of woodcraft, their admiration knew no bounds. At the close of 2 such foolish, idle, happy hours he found himself lying at the feet of the schoolmistress, gazing dreamily in her face, as she sat upon the sloping hillside weaving wreaths of laurel and syringia, in very much the same attitude as he had lain when first they met. Nor was the similitude greatly forced. The weakness of an easy, sensuous nature that had found a dreamy exultation in liquor, it is to be feared was now finding an equal intoxication in love. I think that Sandy was dimly conscious of this himself. I know that he longed to be doing something, slaying a grizzly, scalping a savage, or sacrificing himself in some way for the sake of this sallow-faced, grey-eyed schoolmistress. As I should like to present him in a heroic attitude, I stay my hand with great difficulty at this moment, being only withheld from introducing such an episode by a strong conviction that it does not usually occur at such times. And I trust that my fairest reader, who remembers that, in a real crisis, it is always some uninteresting stranger or unromantic policeman, and not Adolphus, who rescues, will forgive the omission. So, they sat there, undisturbed, the woodpeckers chattering overhead and the voices of the children coming pleasantly from the hollow below. What they said matters little. What they thought, which might have been interesting, did not transpire. The woodpeckers only learned how Miss Mary was an orphan, how she left her uncle's house to come to California for the sake of health and independence, how Sandy was an orphan too, how he came to California for excitement, how he had lived a wild life, and how he was trying to reform, and other details, which, from a woodpecker's viewpoint, undoubtedly must have seemed stupid, and a waste of time. But even in such trifles was the afternoon spent, and when the children were again gathered, and Sandy, with a delicacy which the schoolmistress well understood, took leave of them quietly at the outskirts of the settlement, it had seemed the shortest day of her weary life. As the long, dry summer withered to its roots, the school term of Red Gulch, to use a local euphemism, dried up also. In another day Miss Mary would be free, and for a season at least Red Gulch would know her no more. She was seated alone in the schoolhouse, her cheek resting on her hand, her eyes half closed in one of those daydreams in which Miss Mary, I fear to the danger of school discipline, was lately in the habit of indulging. Her lap was full of mosses, ferns, and other woodland memories. She was so preoccupied with these and her own thoughts that a gentle tapping at the door passed unheard, or translated itself into the remembrance of far-off woodpeckers. When at last it asserted itself more distinctly, she started up with a flushed cheek and opened the door. On the threshold stood a woman the self-assertion and audacity of whose dress were in singular contrast to her timid, irresolute bearing. Miss Mary recognized at a glance the dubious mother of her anonymous pupil. Perhaps she was disappointed, perhaps she was only fastidious, but as she coldly invited her to enter, she half-consciously settled her white cuffs and collar, and gathered closer her own chaste skirts. It was, perhaps, for this reason that the embarrassed stranger, after a moment's hesitation, left her gorgeous parasol open and sticking in the dust beside the door, and then sat down at the farther end of a long bench. Her voice was husky as she began. "I heerd tell that you were goin' down to the bay to-morrow, and I couldn't let you go until I came to thank you for your kindness to my Tommy." Tommy, Miss Mary said, was a good boy, and deserved more than the poor attention she could give him. "Thank you, miss, thank ye!" cried the stranger, brightening even through the colour which Red Gulch knew facetiously as her war paint, and striving in her embarrassment to drag the long bench nearer the schoolmistress. "I thank you, miss, for that. And if I am his mother, there ain't a sweeter, dearer, better boy lives than him. And if I ain't much as says it, there ain't a sweeter, dearer, angeler teacher lives than he's got." Miss Mary, sitting primly behind her desk, with a ruler over her shoulder, opened her grey eyes widely at this, but said nothing. "It ain't for you to be complimented by the like of me, I know," she went on hurriedly. "It ain't for me to be comin' here in broad day to do it, either, but I come to ask a favour. Not for me, miss, not for me, but for the darling boy." Encouraged by a look in the young schoolmistress's eye, and putting her lilac-gloved hands together, the fingers downward, between her knees, she went on in a low voice. "You see, miss, there's no one the boy has any claim on but me, and I ain't the proper person to bring him up. I thought some last year of sending him away to 'Frisco to school, but when they talked of bringing a schoolma'am here, I waited till I saw you, and then I knew it was all right, and I could keep my boy a little longer. And oh, miss, he loves you so much, and if you could hear him talk about you in his pretty way, and if he could ask you what I ask you now, you couldn't refuse him. It is natural," she went on rapidly, in a voice that trembled strangely between pride and humility, "it's natural that he should take to you, miss, for his father, when I first knew him, was a gentleman, and the boy must forget me sooner or later, and so I ain't going to cry about that. For I come to ask you to take my Tommy, God bless him for the bestest, sweetest boy that lives, to take him with you." She had risen and caught the young girl's hand in her own, and had fallen on her knees beside her. "I've plenty money, and it's all yours and his. Put him in some good school, where you can go and see him, and help him to forget his mother. Do with him what you like. The worst you can do will be kindness to what he will learn with me. Only take him out of this wicked life, this cruel place, this home of shame and sorrow. You will, I know you will, won't you? You will, you must not, you cannot say no. You will make him as pure, as gentle as yourself, and when he is grown up, you will tell him his father's name, the name that hasn't passed my lips for years, the name of Alexander Morton, whom they call here Sandy. Miss Mary, do not take your hand away. Miss Mary, speak to me. You will take my boy? Do not put your face from me. I know it ought not to look on such as me. Miss Mary, my God, be merciful. She is leaving me." Miss Mary had risen, and in the gathering twilight had felt her way to the open window. She stood there leaning against the casement, her eyes fixed on the last rosy tints that were fading from the western sky. There was still some of its light on her pure young forehead, on her white collar, on her clasped white hands, but all was fading slowly away. The suppliant had dragged herself, still on her knees, beside her. "I know it takes some time to consider. I will wait here all night, but I cannot go until you speak. Do not deny me now. You will, I see it in your sweet face, such a face as I have seen in my dreams. I see it in your eyes, Miss Mary. You will take my boy." The last red beam crept higher, suffused Miss Mary's eyes with something of its glory, flickered and faded and went out. The sun had set on Red Gulch. In the twilight and silence Miss Mary's voice sounded pleasantly. "I will take the boy.